They flew me to Washington to sign off on a $6.5 billion defense contract. Then, they replaced me in the lobby without realizing I was the only one who could activate the system. No sabotage, no drama, just silence, and a $6.5 billion project frozen in place, all because they forgot who built the foundation. Let me tell you how that happened. The morning started like any other in my 10-year career at Falstaff Defense Systems. My phone lit up with urgent messages from Amanda Krell, our newly appointed CEO. I needed to be on a plane to Washington, D.C. immediately. The Department of Defense was finally ready to implement Project Keystone across their entire command network. $6.5 billion, the culmination of my life's work. I'm Morgan Reese, 39, Chief Infrastructure Architect at Falstaff. Or I was, until yesterday. Now I'm sitting in my home office in Raleigh, North Carolina, watching the stock price of my former employer drop in real time while my phone buzzes with increasingly desperate voicemails. Let me be clear, I didn't sabotage anything. I simply walked away with something they couldn't take from me, something they didn't even realize existed until it was too late. My story with Falstaff began 10 years ago when it was just a scrappy startup with 40 employees working out of a renovated textile mill. Back then, we weren't Falstaff Defense Systems, we were SecureNet Solutions. And our dream wasn't billions in government contracts. We just wanted to build encryption that actually worked. I joined after leaving a comfortable position at a major tech company. The salary cut was significant, but I believed in what we were doing. My background in cryptography and systems architecture made me valuable, but it was my philosophy about security that truly set me apart. I believed then, as I do now, that true security cannot depend on any single point of control. The irony of how this philosophy would eventually play out isn't lost on me. Our big break came 3 years in, when we developed a quantum-resistant encryption protocol that caught the military's attention. It was my design, a novel approach that distributed trust across multiple validators while maintaining operational speed. We called it the Keystone Protocol, a name I chose because it represented the central piece that held everything together, yet was part of a larger arch. The military contracts started small, specific communications channels, isolated networks, but each success built upon the last. I assembled a team of brilliant engineers who shared my vision. We weren't just building technology, we were creating an architecture of trust. 5 years ago, we got our first hint that something much bigger was coming. The Department of Defense approached us about developing a unified encrypted communications framework for their entire command structure. Project Keystone was born. I insisted on one core principle from the beginning: the system would require multiple independent validations to activate or modify. No single entity, not Falstaff, not the government, not even me, could control it unilaterally. This wasn't just philosophical. It was practical security. The government representatives initially pushed back, but eventually agreed when I demonstrated how this approach prevented both external attacks and internal misuse. What I didn't tell them, what I didn't tell anyone, was that I had built an integrity override into the system's foundation. If the validation chain was compromised or altered without proper authorization, the system would quietly, gradually, cease to function. No catastrophic failure, no dramatic shutdown. It would simply stop accepting new initialization requests. This wasn't sabotage. It was protection against exactly the scenario I feared might unfold. Everything changed 2 years ago when SecureNet was acquired. Overnight, we became Falstaff Defense Systems, named after the private equity firm that purchased us. They saw the potential in our growing portfolio of government contracts, particularly Project Keystone. What they didn't see or chose to ignore was the culture and principles that made those contracts possible. The first changes seemed benign: new branding, new office space, expanded HR department, but 6 months in, our founder and CEO, Marcus Winters, was promoted to Chairman Emeritus, a title that effectively sidelined him from day-to-day operations. In his place came Amanda Krell, whose resume boasted impressive stints at financial institutions but lacked any technical background in cybersecurity or defense systems. I tried to give Amanda the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps her management expertise would complement our technical strengths. That hope faded when she brought in Chase Donnelly as our new CTO, effectively positioning him above me in the hierarchy. Chase had a background in commercial software development, consumer apps, and enterprise systems, but nothing related to military-grade security. In our first meeting, he described my Keystone protocol as overly complex and suggested we could streamline the validation requirements. "The government wants simplicity and efficiency," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Multiple validation chains create unnecessary friction." "The friction is the point," I replied. "It's what prevents catastrophic compromise." He smiled in that patronizing way men often do when they're about to dismiss a woman's expertise. "The landscape has changed. Morgan, we need to evolve." Over the next 18 months, I watched as they systematically dismantled the culture we had built. Engineers who questioned the new direction were pushed out. Documentation requirements were reduced to speed up development cycles. And perhaps most concerning, Chase began suggesting modifications to the Keystone protocol itself. I pushed back at every turn, leveraging my position as chief infrastructure architect and my status as the original designer. I reminded them repeatedly that the Department of Defense had approved our approach specifically because of its distributed security model. Changing it would require starting the approval process from scratch. This argument kept them at bay, but only because they were fixated on the impending $6.5 billion implementation contract. Once that was signed, I suspected they would move quickly to evolve the system, regardless of the security implications. What they couldn't know, was that such changes would trigger the integrity override I had built into the foundation. The system would quietly begin to shut itself down. 3 weeks ago, the Department of Defense confirmed that they were ready to proceed with full implementation. Project Keystone would be deployed across their entire command network, from the Pentagon to forward operating bases worldwide. The contract would be signed in Washington, and I would need to be present as the technical authority. That's when the walls began closing in. First came the reorganization memo. My team was being split into 3 distinct groups, each reporting to different directors who in turn reported to Chase. My role was described as strategic oversight, effectively removing me from direct management. Then came the budget review. Projects I had initiated were questioned or canceled outright. Research avenues I considered crucial were deemed speculative and defunded. Finally, I was informed that all technical documentation would now require Chase's approval before submission to government partners. The message was clear: they were systematically reducing my authority and access. Still, they needed me for the contract signing. My name was on too many documents, my reputation too entwined with Project Keystone's development. The Department of Defense expected me to be there, to provide the technical assurances they required. So I boarded the plane to Washington, reviewing the final implementation documents during the flight. Everything seemed in order, though I noted with concern some appendices referencing streamlined validation procedures scheduled for post-implementation. They were already planning the changes I had fought against. We arrived at our hotel near the Pentagon the evening before the signing. Amanda called a preparation meeting in her suite, attended by Chase, the legal team, and several board members who had flown in for the occasion. "We want to ensure tomorrow goes smoothly," Amanda began, her voice carrying that artificial warmth executives often use when they're about to deliver bad news. "This contract represents a transformative moment for Falstaff." I nodded, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Which is why we've had to make some difficult decisions regarding the company's structure moving forward." There it was. Chase picked up the thread. "Morgan, your contributions to Project Keystone have been invaluable, but as we move into the implementation phase, we need a more—" He paused, searching for the right corporate euphemism. "Integrated approach to system architecture." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew. Amanda smiled. "It means that effective immediately following the contract signing, your role will be transitioning to Senior Technical Advisor. Chase will assume direct oversight of Project Keystone implementation as Chief System Architect. They were demoting me, pushing me into an advisory role with no actual authority, but they still needed me to help secure the contract. The audacity was almost impressive. "And if I don't agree to this transition?" I asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Amanda's smile didn't waver, but it no longer reached her eyes. "This isn't a negotiation. Morgan, the board has approved this restructuring. Your employment agreement gives the company significant latitude in defining your role." She was right about that. Like most tech employees, I had signed contracts giving the company broad powers, but there was something they had overlooked. "What about the technical validation requirements?" I asked. "The DoD contract specifically names me as the primary validation authority for system implementation." Chase waved his hand dismissively. "We've already addressed that. The updated documentation lists the Chief System Architect position as the validation authority, not you specifically. And the DoD approved this change." Amanda nodded. "Their technical team signed off on it last week. They understand that companies evolve." I sat back, processing this information. They had been planning this for months, systematically removing obstacles to my replacement. The only reason they were telling me now, on the eve of the signing, was to prevent me from making a scene in front of the DoD officials. "I see," I said finally, "and my team will be reorganized under the new structure," Chase replied, "though we value their expertise, of course." Of course, they would keep the engineers who complied and find reasons to remove those loyal to me or my security philosophy. It was corporate restructuring 101. "Well," I said, rising from my seat, "thank you for your transparency. If there's nothing else, I should prepare for tomorrow." Amanda looked relieved at my apparent acceptance. "That's everything. We appreciate your professionalism. Morgan, this transition doesn't diminish your contributions." I nodded and left the suite, returning to my room where I spent the night reviewing the Keystone documentation, not the sanitized version they had prepared for the DoD, but my original technical specifications. I needed to be certain of exactly what would happen when they attempted to implement changes without proper validation. The integrity override would work gradually. First, new initialization requests would fail, appearing as routine technical glitches. Then, existing connections would begin to degrade. Within weeks, the entire system would be effectively frozen, not crashed, just immobile, like a car with a full tank of gas but no ignition key. They could fix it, eventually. With enough time and resources, they could rebuild the validation system from scratch. But that would take months, possibly years, and would require starting the DoD approval process from the beginning. Morning came too quickly. I dressed carefully in my most professional attire, a charcoal suit that projected authority without being flashy. Today would be my last day at Falstaff Defense Systems, though my soon-to-be former colleagues didn't know that yet. We met in the hotel lobby at 8:00 a.m. Amanda, Chase, the legal team, and 3 board members including Harrison Falstaff himself, the namesake of the private equity firm that had acquired us. He rarely involved himself in operational matters, so his presence underscored the importance of today's contract. "Morgan," he greeted me with the hearty handshake of someone who collects companies like trophies. "The woman of the hour, this contract wouldn't be happening without your brilliant work." The irony was palpable. "Thank you, Mr. Falstaff. Project Keystone has been my life's work. And soon it will be securing the lives of our service members worldwide," he replied, seemingly oblivious to last night's meeting. Either he wasn't aware of my impending demotion, or he was a better actor than I gave him credit for. We traveled to the Pentagon in 2 black SUVs, arriving at the visitors' entrance precisely on schedule. As we passed through security, I noticed Amanda and Chase exchanging glances. Something wasn't going according to their plan. The answer became clear when we were escorted to the conference room. Waiting for us was General Catherine Ward, the DoD's Chief of Cybersecurity Operations, along with her technical team. I had worked closely with Catherine over the years, building a relationship based on mutual respect. "Morgan," she said warmly, stepping forward to greet me. "So good to see you again. We're excited to finally implement the full Keystone Protocol." Before I could respond, Amanda smoothly inserted herself between us. General Ward, Amanda Krell, CEO of Falstaff Defense Systems, were equally excited about this partnership. Catherine acknowledged Amanda with a professional nod before turning back to me. I was just telling my team how your distributed validation approach finally convinced our more skeptical security advisors. The way you've architected the system to prevent both external and internal compromise is truly innovative. I could practically feel Amanda and Chase tensing beside me. This wasn't part of their script. Thank you. Catherine, security is only as strong as its foundational principles. Chase cleared his throat. General Ward, Chase Donnelly, CTO, I've been working closely with Morgan on the final implementation details. In fact, I'll be leading the implementation team moving forward. Catherine's expression cooled slightly. Is that so? That's not reflected in the documentation we approved? Amanda stepped in smoothly. We've recently made some organizational adjustments to optimize our implementation capabilities. Chase will be assuming the role of Chief System Architect effective immediately after today's signing. Morgan will be transitioning to a senior advisory position. Catherine looked at me, one eyebrow raised in silent question. I simply maintained a neutral expression. I see, she said finally. Well, organizational decisions are certainly your prerogative, Ms. Krell. However, the technical validation protocols specified in our agreement name Morgan Reese specifically as the primary validation authority. Any change to that would require a formal amendment and reapproval process. Amanda's smile never wavered. We've already submitted the updated documentation reflecting the organizational change. Your technical team approved it last week. Catherine frowned. That's not possible. I personally review all changes to validation protocols, and I've approved no such modification. The room fell silent. Amanda glanced at Chase, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. There must be some misunderstanding, Amanda said finally. Our legal team assured me the changes had been approved. One of Falstaff's lawyers stepped forward, rifling through his briefcase before producing a document. Here it is, Approval for Validation Authority Transfer, signed by Colonel James Matheson. Catherine took the document, examined it briefly, then handed it to one of her staff. Colonel Matheson oversees procurement logistics, not security protocols. He has no authority to approve changes to validation requirements. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Amanda's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the panic beneath. This is just a procedural misunderstanding, she said, regaining her composure. We can certainly maintain the original validation structure until the proper approvals are in place. Catherine studied her for a long moment. Yes, we can. Morgan remains the technical validation authority as specified in the original agreement. She turned to me. Is this organizational change something you support? Morgan? All eyes in the room turned to me. This was the moment of truth. General Ward, I've dedicated 10 years of my life to developing the Keystone Protocol. Its security model is based on distributed validation specifically to prevent centralized control or compromise. I cannot in good conscience support changes that undermine that foundational principle. The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's expression hardened into barely controlled fury. Chase looked pale. Harrison Falstaff simply appeared confused. Catherine nodded slowly. I thought as much. She turned to Amanda. Ms. Krell, Falstaff Defense Systems was selected for this contract largely based on the security architecture designed by Morgan Reese. If you're changing direction, we need to understand those changes before proceeding. Amanda recovered quickly. There's no change in direction. General, Morgan's vision remains our guiding principle. This is simply an organizational adjustment to optimize implementation. Then you won't object to maintaining Morgan as the technical validation authority, as specified in our agreement. It wasn't a question, and Amanda knew it. Of course not. Morgan's involvement is crucial. Catherine nodded, satisfied for the moment. Good. Then let's proceed with the contract signing. The next hour passed in a blur of formalities. Documents were reviewed, signatures applied, congratulations exchanged. I signed where directed, maintaining a professional demeanor throughout. No one watching would have guessed that I was already composing my resignation letter in my head. When the ceremony concluded, Catherine pulled me aside. "Something's not right at Falstaff, is it?" I chose my words carefully. "The company is evolving in ways that don't align with my security philosophy." She studied me intently. "The Keystone Protocol is too important to compromise. Whatever's happening, don't let them undermine what you've built." "I won't," I promised. "The system will maintain its integrity one way or another." As we prepared to leave the Pentagon, Amanda cornered me in the hallway. "That was unprofessional. Morgan, you deliberately undermined our position with General Ward." I answered her question honestly. "Would you have preferred I lie to the Department of Defense?" Her eyes narrowed. "We'll discuss your future at Falstaff when we return to Raleigh. For now, maintain appearances." I smiled. Of course. The return journey to North Carolina was tense. I sat alone, reviewing documents on my tablet while the executives huddled at the front of the plane, occasionally glancing in my direction. They were undoubtedly planning their next move. Mine was already decided. When we landed, I declined the company car, instead calling a rideshare directly from the airport. Amanda raised an eyebrow but didn't object. She probably assumed I'd be in her office the next morning for the formal demotion. Instead, I went home and spent the evening preparing my resignation letter. It was brief, professional, and effective immediately. I cited irreconcilable differences regarding security philosophy as my reason for leaving. I also prepared emails to my team, explaining my decision without undermining the company. They would need to make their own choices about whether to stay or go. I sent everything at precisely 7:00 a.m., when I knew the executive team would be in their morning meeting. Then I turned off my phone, made a cup of coffee, and waited. By noon, news of my resignation had spread throughout the company. My email inbox filled with messages, confusion from colleagues, support from my team, and increasingly urgent demands from Amanda and Chase to come in for a meeting. I ignored them all. That afternoon, I filed the paperwork to establish a new company, Reese Integrity Networks. The name wasn't subtle, but subtlety wasn't my goal anymore. 3 days passed before the first signs of trouble appeared at Falstaff. One of my former team members, Alex, called from a personal number. "It's starting," he said without preamble. "The validation failures you predicted." "What exactly is happening?" I asked, though I already knew. "New initialization requests are being rejected. Chase is calling it a routine glitch. But the pattern matches exactly what you said would happen if they tried to modify the validation chains." "And have they?" "Immediately after your resignation, Chase announced a streamlined validation process that removes several of the distributed verification steps. They've been trying to implement it for 2 days." I wasn't surprised. They would have seen my resignation as an opportunity to finally make the changes they wanted. "How are they handling it?" I asked. Alex's laugh was without humor. "Badly. Chase is blaming the implementation team. Amanda is pressuring everyone to fix it immediately because the DoD is expecting the first phase to go live next week." "And what are you going to do?" There was a pause. "I submitted my resignation this morning. So did Priya and Elias. My 3 most senior engineers, the only ones besides me who truly understood the Keystone architecture. I'm starting something new," I told him. "If you're interested, we should talk." "I thought you might be. And yes, we definitely should." Within a week, Reese Integrity Networks had a core team of 7 former Falstaff engineers. We set up in a small office space in downtown Raleigh, initially funding everything from my savings. Our mission was simple: build security systems based on distributed trust rather than centralized control. Meanwhile, Falstaff's problems were growing. The validation failures had spread beyond new initialization requests. Existing connections were becoming unstable, exactly as the integrity override was designed to do. The Department of Defense was starting to ask serious questions. 10 days after my resignation, I received my first contact from Amanda. An email, surprisingly humble in tone. "Morgan, I hope this finds you well. There appear to be some unexpected complications with the Keystone implementation that our team is struggling to resolve. Given your intimate knowledge of the system architecture, we would value your consultation. Falstaff is prepared to offer a consulting fee of $1,500 per hour for your expertise. Please let me know if you're available to discuss this opportunity. Amanda Krell, CEO, Falstaff Defense Systems. I didn't respond. This wasn't about money. 3 days later, another email arrived. Morgan, the situation with Project Keystone has become critical. The DoD is questioning our ability to deliver as promised. Our technical team has been unable to resolve the validation issues despite continuous effort. We're prepared to offer $10,000 per hour for your immediate assistance, with a guaranteed minimum of 40 hours. Additionally, we're open to discussing a return to your previous position with expanded authority over the technical implementation. This is urgent. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Amanda Krell, CEO, Falstaff Defense Systems. Again, I didn't respond. Their problem wasn't technical, it was philosophical. They had tried to centralize control of a system explicitly designed to prevent such centralization. No amount of money would change my position on that fundamental principle. 2 weeks after my resignation, I received a different kind of call. General Catherine Ward, speaking from the Pentagon. Morgan, we have a situation with Project Keystone. Falstaff is reporting unexpected technical complications that are delaying implementation. I'm no longer with Falstaff. General, I resigned the day after the contract signing. A pause. I suspected as much when I couldn't reach you through official channels. What happened? I explained the situation, the attempted demotion, the philosophical differences regarding centralized control, my resignation. I didn't mention the integrity override explicitly, but I didn't need to. So if they attempt to remove the distributed validation requirements you designed, she began. The system protects itself, I finished. It's not sabotage. Catherine, it's architectural integrity. The system was designed from the ground up to prevent exactly this kind of centralized takeover. It's operating as intended. She was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Falstaff is claiming they can fix it, given enough time. They probably can, eventually, but they'd need to start from scratch with the validation architecture, which would require new approval from your security team. That would set us back years. Yes. Another long pause. I understand you've started a new company. This surprised me. News travels fast. In certain circles, Reese Integrity Networks, correct, staffed by former Falstaff engineers who worked on Project Keystone. That's right. Would your company be in a position to assist the Department of Defense with a related security project on an expedited basis? Now I understood. The DoD wasn't just concerned about delays, they were looking for alternatives. We're small but focused. General, what exactly did you have in mind? A pilot project, similar architecture to Keystone, but implemented for a specific command channel rather than the entire network. Proof of concept, with potential for expansion if successful. We could certainly discuss that possibility. Good. My office will contact you formally tomorrow. The initial contract would be in the $3 million range, assuming you can deliver within 90 days. After we hung up, I sat back and considered the implications. The DoD wasn't waiting for Falstaff to fix their problems. They were already looking for alternatives, and they had come directly to me. The next day, the formal request arrived from the Pentagon. By the end of the week, Reese Integrity Networks had its first major government contract. Meanwhile, Falstaff's troubles were mounting. Their stock price had fallen 12% as rumors spread about problems with the Keystone implementation. The financial press was starting to ask questions about the viability of the $6.5 billion contract. 3 weeks after my resignation, the dam finally broke. Falstaff Defense Systems announced a temporary delay in the Project Keystone implementation due to technical refinements. The stock immediately dropped another 10%, bringing the total decline to 22%. That same day, Amanda Krell was removed as CEO. Chase Donnelly was also terminated. The board appointed an interim leadership team and announced a comprehensive review of the company's technical capabilities. The following morning, I received a call from Harrison Falstaff himself. "Morgan, Harrison Falstaff here. I hope I'm catching you at a good time." "Mr. Falstaff, this is unexpected." "Yes, well, unusual circumstances call for direct communication. I'll be brief. The situation at Falstaff Defense Systems has become untenable. The board has authorized me to offer you a return to the company in a leadership capacity, specifically as CEO." I nearly laughed. "You want me to come back as CEO?" "With full technical authority over Project Keystone and all related systems, your security philosophy would be enshrined as company policy. The board would provide written guarantees." "And why would I consider this offer when I'm building my own company?" He sighed. "Because Falstaff has the infrastructure, the governmental relationships, and the contract already in place. Your new venture, impressive as it is, will take years to achieve comparable scale. Together, we could implement your vision immediately." He wasn't wrong about the scale. Building Reese Integrity Networks to Falstaff's size would take time, but that wasn't the point. "Mr. Falstaff, I appreciate the offer, but I left because the company's direction fundamentally conflicted with my security principles. An architecture built on control can never be truly secure. We're prepared to change that direction, Morgan, whatever it takes, including acknowledging publicly that the current problems stem from attempting to centralize control of a system designed for distributed trust." A pause. "That would be difficult from a liability perspective." "Then I'm afraid we have nothing further to discuss. I wish you luck finding a solution." 2 days later, the Department of Defense announced it was reviewing the Keystone contract with Falstaff Defense Systems. The stock fell another 15%. A week after that came the final blow. The DoD officially terminated the $6.5 billion contract, citing material failure to meet technical specifications. Simultaneously, they announced a new $2.9 billion 7-year contract with Reese Integrity Networks to develop a next-generation secure communications framework. Falstaff Defense Systems stock collapsed. Trading was temporarily halted as the market digested the news. When it resumed, the company had lost nearly 60% of its value in less than a month. I took no pleasure in their downfall. Many good people still work there, engineers and technicians, who had nothing to do with the executive decisions that led to this outcome, but I also recognized the necessary lesson. Security isn't just a technical specification, it's a philosophy that must permeate every level of an organization. In the months that followed, Reese Integrity Networks grew rapidly. We hired selectively, focusing on engineers who shared our distributed security philosophy. We moved to larger offices, established formal development processes, and built relationships with government agencies beyond the Department of Defense. I never spoke publicly about what happened at Falstaff. There was no tell-all interview, no gloating press release. The industry understood anyway. The story spread through professional networks, becoming something of a legend in cybersecurity circles how a single architect had built a system that protected itself from its own creators. A year after my resignation, Falstaff Defense Systems was acquired by a larger defense contractor for a fraction of its former value. The Keystone Protocol was abandoned, its code archived as a lesson in what not to do. My former colleagues who had remained were absorbed into the new company's structure, their expertise redirected to other projects. Meanwhile, our secure communications framework was being implemented across select military channels, proving its resilience against both external attacks and internal manipulation attempts. General Ward became our strongest advocate within the defense establishment, testifying to congressional committees about the importance of distributed security models in protecting critical infrastructure. Harrison Falstaff reached out one last time, requesting a private meeting. I agreed, meeting him at a quiet restaurant in Raleigh. "You've built something remarkable," he said, looking older than I remembered, "both technically and as a company." "Thank you. We have a good team." "I want you to know that I've learned from what happened. The board trusted Amanda and Chase because they spoke the language of efficiency and profit. We didn't understand the security implications of their changes. Most people don't, I acknowledged. Security rarely fails catastrophically all at once. It erodes gradually, one compromise at a time, until the foundation is gone. He nodded thoughtfully. That's precisely what happened to us. By the time we recognized the problem, it was too late. He paused, studying me. You never sabotaged the system, did you? You just built it to protect itself. The integrity override was part of the original design. It was documented in the technical specifications that no one bothered to read completely. He actually smiled at that. Hidden in plain sight. Brilliant. He raised his glass. To integrity in all its forms. I raised mine in return. To foundations that remember who built them. Today, Reese Integrity Networks employs over 200 people. Our secure communications framework has expanded beyond military applications to critical infrastructure protection, financial systems, and healthcare networks. Every system we build incorporates the same fundamental principle: distributed validation that prevents centralized control or compromise. I still serve as CEO, but I've surrounded myself with leaders who share my security philosophy. We've turned down acquisition offers from larger companies, preferring to maintain our independence and our principles. The story of Falstaff Defense Systems and Project Keystone is taught in business schools now, alongside other famous corporate failures. What happened wasn't about revenge or sabotage. It was about architectural integrity, about building systems that remain true to their foundational principles even when those who manage them lose their way. They flew me to Washington to sign off on a $6.5 billion defense contract. Then, they replaced me in the lobby without realizing I was the only one who could activate the system. No sabotage, no drama, just silence, and a $6.5 billion project frozen in place. All because they forgot who built the foundation. Security isn't about who holds the title. It's about who understands the risk of centralized power. They forgot that I built Keystone not just in code, but in principle, and when they fired me, they didn't just lose a person, they lost the only access code.